Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Real 1% podcast where we talk all things military. At one point or another, everyone's going to have to leave the military and you're going to have to find your next mission in life, whether you're a private or whether you're a command sergeant major or even a four-star general. So today's guest is known as the military medium. He answered the call to action. His name is Dean. He's a fellow Army veteran, over 20 years of service, with most of those years coming on active duty. He got lucky, folks. We're gonna have to ask him how he got that AGR role. Everyone's looking for it. Everyone's looking for it. You get those good hours and you get to go to some places and do some good work. So I got to ask him about that. His last deployment was to Kosovo. He served in administration roles. He served as a non-commissioned officer. He was a paratrooper. He was an infantry. So I'm sure his knees and his back are, treating him right about now. And he's in a cold weather state, so I'm sure he needs to probably get down here to Florida and make sure he sit by the beach or something like that. He was at E7, and after retirement, he did a little bit of morning broadcasting on the FM radio, and then he switched over to podcasting. So that's something else I'd like to touch on this episode. And like I said, he's known as the military medium. But without further ado, Dean, man, appreciate you coming on the show. How you doing this morning?
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me on, Michael. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for joining me and letting
Yeah.
everybody know about your story. So, what made you really want to join the Army, man? Was it something that was a lifelong dream, or something that
Ye-
just you stumbled across?
Yeah. It's funny. It's kind of serendipitous because my son, who is 13, just asked me that yesterday. He was like, "Dad, why'd you join the military?" And it really made me pause. Like, why the fuck did why did it wasn't like, go in the Army, go to jail, right? The old Jody. No, I knew there was something ingrained to me. It wasn't expected. But I came from a military family.
Okay.
My dad was Canadian Air Force. We were sharing before we went live that I grew up right on the Canadian border. Something I didn't share. My dad was born in Canada, and after his parents died at a young age, my dad went off into the Canadian Air Force, and then subsequently, moved close to or got stationed close to Minnesota and met my wife or my wife. No, well, this is weird. No, my mom, obviously, and Michael's like, now this shit's getting good.
This is about to get good right here. We about to go viral. We about to go viral off that right here.
Viral. Yeah, so the Freudian slip. No, so he served a number of years in the Canadian Air Force. So that was something. And then, of course, my brother joined the American Air Force. I had to break the mold, of course, and join the Army. And, so I had, a grandfather that served during World War I. He was a farrier. He worked with horses, with the Army. Numerous uncles that served in other branches, Army, Navy. I think we had some Marine Corps in there. So really a variance, like a lot of families in the U.S. You get in the fabric of America, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a common theme, regardless of what country or whatever. And so it wasn't expected. It was never said, when you graduate, get in the knife hand and, you will join the military. It was never that. It was, hey, pave your own way, figure it out for yourself. And for me, I just knew there was something in me saying that you need to serve at a bigger level. And for me, that was a no-brainer. Of the military was the vehicle. But it was really, when it came down to it, right? I think for so many young men and women, what branch? And that was really a big quandary for me, because I was like, ooh, no, I'm not, I'd like to fish, but I don't think the Navy is for me,
Yeah.
so you start eliminating. And I was like, ooh, Army, Marine Corps, Air Force. And obviously at the end of the day, as you read my bio, it was, I picked the Army, and that was back in '89. And good Lord, doesn't seem that long ago, but it is. And yeah, so that's kind of the reason that I joined. It was just something integral, a part of, there was no question what I was going to do. It was just, I guess to boil it all down, I felt the need, or I felt the calling to serve at a bigger level. And I just knew that the military was that.
Okay.
So,
How was it growing up with your dad in the military?
my dad was so I was born in 70, right?
Okay.
And my dad, just give everybody a little context. And my dad had just gotten out about a few years before I was born.
Okay.
So my dad got out of the Canadian Air Force. My and I had my three other siblings at the time, were born in Canada, and they all moved to northern Minnesota, back to where my mom was from. And then I was the oopsie baby, right? Like, you got to get out of the service. Like, hey, I'm going to get my shit together. Like,
Yeah.
I think of myself, right? Like, I'm going to retire, or I'm going to get out. And then all of a sudden, I'm pregnant. You think, put that in context for us. It's like, oh shit. And, but yeah, so that's what it was. I never knew what it was like. I never grew up as a military brat.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard stories from my brother and my two sisters, but and of course mom and dad sharing, so but nothing significant. And then, but everything for me obviously was just a normal blue collar family, that middle class family in northern Minnesota. um
Oh, that's
you know
cool.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fine. I mean, it's probably, I don't know if it would be say better or worse, but it's probably good that he was around more. I mean, if you were around when he
Right.
was serving, you already know, as everyone else knows, it's in the military. No matter where you
Right.
are, you're not there that much, man. You're dropping your kids
No.
off before PT and
Yep.
picking them up after 5. What time does
Yep.
that leave you, man? You know what I mean?
Right.
So you had the
Right.
benefit of having your mom and dad around, which is a great childhood for any kid. Honestly, looking back at it. Did you know that you wanted to be 11 Bravo? How did the recruiter? What they sell you on? What they sell you on, man? What they do? What they
it
tell
was
you?
it
What
was
they
it
tell
was
you?
the era of Blu-ray, the big, or the I think was Blu-ray, the huge, looked like a big record, right?
Yeah.
And then, oh, laser disc, that's what it was. It wasn't Blu-ray, it was a big laser disc, and they put it in the big old, um, you know, old player, and the be all you can be and all that happy horse shit. And and the airborne commercial, remember, morning first sergeant, like.
Yeah.
And really what they cut out of that, we all know, it'd be like, shut the fuck up, like you could hear the first sergeant saying that. Of course, not going to put that in there, but I always think about that commercial. But um it was something that, I can't remember the conversation. And here I am, a guy that is, I don't like heights. I still don't.
Same.
But unless I know I'm on stable footing. But it's, yeah, I don't know what made me say yes. It was like, hey, you get some extra money in your pocket every month, for
So you
jump
signed up off
pay.
the beginning. You signed up off the
Yep. So
beginning,
it was
first
right in the
contract on.
contract.
Oh,
Yep.
right, your contract, right? So
So
basic training, OSET. You stayed at
yep.
Fort Benning. Were you at Fort Benning the whole time?
Yep. So I stayed in Fort Benning the whole time, right from basic AIT. And then, funny story, around then they were doing the cohort units, and I got orders towards the end of OSET, and they were like, I'm Alaska. And I was like, sweet. Like, I was thinking, but it was, I was like looking at the dates, and I was like, of course I had to get my butt chewed because I had to go up to the drill sergeant. And I was like, I'm supposed to go to airborne school. And because they missed it. And of course, you have to see everybody in their chain, all the way up to the first sergeant. You got to get your paperwork and verify it. And so they had to amend my orders. And so I ended up not going to Alaska as part of a cohort unit. Um, and then yeah, so then I went right over to airborne school right after graduation, and jumped right into that and started doing all that happy horse shit. So it's,
How was airborne school for you, man? For someone that doesn't like heights, I don't like it either.
mhm.
Um, Yeah, man. I don't know. Respect to you for doing that over, in basic training, everyone has to go through the towers, and
Right.
that's different than getting up like to like 250-foot tower week and
Mm,
other ground week when you're
right.
doing PLFs all day, every day, and just breaking your knees down. And we had a sergeant, one of my NCOs, my first deployment, he went, Sergeant Jackson. He went to airborne school, came back, we deployed to Iraq, and he used to make us do PLFs all damn day in Iraq, man. So I got a little taste of it, but not the whole thing like you. But from
Right.
someone that didn't like heights
Yeah.
and signing up for airborne school, talk about that experience.
You know what I found, Michael, is it not the jumping from the aircraft was fine, even if you were, you had door position, everything else. I don't know, it's just different. But the only thing that gave me any pause, I guess if you'll call it, what and it sounds stupid, but were the 34-foot towers.
Okay.
And, the big towers, the 250 foot or whatever, we couldn't use them while I was there because of high winds.
Mm,
They're always an iconic, big landmark there on Benning, but, we never used them because of the winds. But we, went right after, obviously do ground week, tower week, and jump week. But we just hit the swing or, like not only the swing landing trainer, but the 34-foot towers. I mean, talking about your crotch was so raw from the harness all day and then running back and forth. I mean, it was just crazy. But yeah, I think after a while too, and I don't want to give anybody the misperception, is you tend to get more used to it. I remember when I was stationed in Alaska and I did my first jump after, you know, airborne school, and that, I graduated in December of '89.
okay.
And here when I went to Alaska, I had been a crap load of years. And that was like my first, what they call your cherry jump after, your five jumps. So that was my sixth jump.
Okay.
And quite honestly, that jump, I remember being the most nervous or the most scared because I was like, holy shit. But after that, it was interesting because even though I still have a fear of heights, it's almost manageable. And it's like I don't negate the fear or, I recognize it for what it is, but I don't keep it doesn't keep me from what I need to do, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Absolutely.
So every time when I did the jumps or even when I went to air assault school when I was at Fort Campbell, um, did it was this something that I was always doing a happy dance on top of the rappel towers? Probably not. After a while you get more used to it, you get a little bit more ballsy, you feel a little bit more confident, everything else. But that it was still there. And for whatever reason, I knew I was safe. I knew that I was well trained. But yeah, it was, it's just manageable. And so they always talk about having the courage, because the courage is knowing that you're scared, but you're still doing what you need to do in the face of that, regardless of whether it's rappelling down the side of a tower or jumping off or whatever the hell you're doing, or whether you're taking rounds or whatever. It's still acting anyways, instead of freezing up. And I
That's
will
true.
say that is something that I never did. I never on any jump or any rappel or anything like that. Maybe I'm just too stupid. But my dad always said, two things fall from the sky: bird shit and idiots. And he said, you certainly don't look like bird shit. And I was
Yeah,
like,
man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Always give me a hard time, but I knew he was always proud of that fact. But so yeah, it's kind of interesting how everybody manages it. And you meet other people that have a fear of something. And I think, airborne school has a great you could use a great analogy of trust, right? You got to trust the riggers. And I know that there is actually since I've retired, talking about there's a talk about a Vietnam veteran that's gone on to be a professional speaker about how he was shot down in over, I think, was North Vietnam or somewhere, and in Vietnam, and talking about when he ejected out of his Phantom, I believe it was, about his parachute obviously saved his life, and he gone on to talk about, who packed your parachute today, about not
Mm.
only trusting those around you, but also acknowledging the people that you interact with every day. And so sometimes I think about that, how airborne school has, the analogy of trusting those to do the job, the riggers, the jump masters, the pilots, the load masters, everybody,
Everybody.
even your jump buddy behind you, in front of you, that they don't F up and, you get a static line injury. And so you're trusting a lot of things, and you got to do your shit too. But,
That's true.
um, so yeah, so I just kind of look at it a little bit deeper. But I guess that goes a little bit beyond what you asked, but
No, that's good, man.
um,
That's
yeah,
good. I mean,
so
it's all good information. I feel like you're right.
yeah,
If you're a rigger, that must be crazy going to AIT, packing your own chute, or learn how to pack
I
chutes and
can
then go
only
jump with it.
imagine, right? For the first
uh,
time, like, I hope I got this shit right. You better pay attention. Yeah.
Seriously, that's like a double whammy. But so you still got to go to Alaska after. Did you go there direct? You went there directly after airborne school, and just amended your order to
No, no,
no.
no.
Okay.
I went right to Fort Campbell, or sorry,
Okay.
Fort Campbell, Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay.
And I was assigned to the Ninth Infantry Division. So for all our fellow Army veterans, you're like, shit, he's old. And
Damn.
I was there when the Ninth Infantry Division went away, and we reorganized to the 133rd Separate Armored Cavalry. Like, where the hell's our tanks, right?
Yeah.
And we always used to walk around going clank, clank, clank. Where's our tank? And we were motorized. It was a motorized concept at Fort Lewis at the time,
Okay.
because I was there over Desert Storm, and but I was only there for, it was shy of 4 years. I was on a 4-year contract. Bush Sr. was the president, and he came out. He wanted to downsize the military, if you guys remember that. And they came out with the first round of the early out program. And I was 22 and stupid, and said, you know what? The hell with this. I'm done. And
Mm.
if you had so many years in the service by a certain date, you could get out. Honorable discharge, everything. They release you early from your contractual obligation. And by the time I actually left, it was, it was almost 6 years, or sorry, 6 years,
Wow.
4 years. So it was 3 years. I don't know. Was it 8 months? Whatever. A few months. It makes you feel good, whatever. And so my first stint, 89 to 92, I always say it was 3.5 years that I was in. And then I was out for about two. I got out and I went back to northern Minnesota. And, the economy in 92, if anybody remembers, just sucked
Mm.
all across the country as well. And so I was working construction. I was working, and I was like, well, this even sucks worse.
Right.
And here I am, 22, and living with my parents. And then, mom and dad want to know where you going. And I'm like, well, I'm going out. I'm like, I wasn't used to that anymore. I was used
Absolutely.
to doing, you're your own person. And so I was like, you know what? I need to go back in. And so in 93, so I was out about a year and a half. I know I said two, but um I went back in 93, and I was assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, with 3rd Battalion 187 Rakashan with
Rakasan. Yeah.
101st. And ended up going to air. Now, back in those days, where I was, this is before they did, back in the 90s, they had air assault school right beside our battalion headquarters. So this is back in the day of Command Sergeant Purdy who was our battalion command sergeant major. And if you ever pick up any old Vietnam books talking about LURS recon and everything, he's in there as a private, one of the few remaining or survivors of a near ambush. He was all fucked up. And then, if you remember, we had, oh, good Lord, now I'm not going to remember his name. Who was our CIA director that was, oh, good God. I even
What year do you think it was?
So this was 93, or well, being CIA director.
Yeah.
He was he under
James
the
Woodsley?
No. So this under the Obama administration, I believe.
Okay, hold on.
A white dude.
John Brennan?
No.
Damn it. Leon Panetta?
No.
All right, we
Starts
failed.
with a P. Petraeus. There we go.
David Petraeus.
Yeah, General
okay.
Petraeus. So
yeah, he was a commander, right? Of
yep.
of 101st.
Yep.
Okay.
So well, then Lieutenant Colonel Petraeus was our battalion commander.
Okay.
And I feel bad for forgetting his name because I actually interviewed the dude on the podcast.
Hell yeah.
And but anyways, Purdy and Sergeant Major Purdy, Lieutenant Colonel Petraeus was our battalion head shed, and school, air assault school, was like right next door, like the headquarters and then school. And so I know that they've since moved and everything else, but yeah, so it was easy to go to air assault school. It was right there.
You just gotta roll out of bed. You roll out. Yeah,
you roll out of bed, go out the, and of course we were in the old condemned barracks and Roach. It was nasty. It was the ghetto, we called it, and and all that. But so yeah, and then right after Fort Campbell, the unit was going to the Sinai, Egypt for their rotation. And I really wanted to go, but I came down on orders to go to Korea. And I was like, shit. And that was the curse. They always said, you got the curse. And I was like, what's a curse? And they were like, oh, dude, like that's a Fort Campbell curse. Like people go to Korea and then they come back to Campbell and Korea, Campbell and Korea. And they were like, and I was like, no, I'm going to do something. I don't know what it is. But so I got to Korea, and actually I had an opportunity to, in the Turtle Farm in Korea, you get to their reception repo depot. They had some folks come along and look through records, and they were interviewing people that were infantry, that had certain PT scores, that had a certain height, weight, different things. And they're like, hey, we are with a specialized group. And I was thinking, well, is this how you get recruited for the CIA or some stupid shit? And they were like, no, we're with the Joint Security Area, or JSA. Okay. And we are a American infantry unit that is located just outside of the DMZ, north of the Imjim River. And we have a specialized mission. We're part of the United Nations Security Battalion. And, and we look at new arrivals for PT score, height, weight, different things like that. And we pre-screen. We have priority pickings over everybody. However, you have to volunteer to go, because there is no females up here. There is no, other than, Ajim, or, the females that run the local village, like Get Soju and Kimchi and stuff. And so I volunteered. I think one out of, there was a whole handful of us, and everybody else like, no female, screw that. And I was like, they can't keep you up here the whole time. You got to be able to get, like a 4-day pass or something. And so I did a year with the up in the JSA. part of their scout platoon. And then right towards before I got out, they usually try to, if you do a good job, they try to give you a good gig, like be the sergeant major's driver, where you can get like separate ration pay. You take dignitaries to the United Nations Council briefings and different things. And so I did that for my last, I think it was my last 4 months in country. And then, but while I was there, here's the kicker. I needed to reenlist or get out, right? And I was like, well, what about maybe I could do a reenlistment and go somewhere. And so I ended up going to Fort Drum. I did a short
Oh my God.
reenlistment, and I was like Fort Drum with the 10th Mountain. And
Did you want that? Because that's like,
yeah, I
okay, you
actually
wanted that.
did,
Okay.
because there wasn't a lot of options at the time. And I got there and I actually liked Fort Drum. I
Okay.
actually did. It was close to Canada. We'd go up and party a lot.
Right.
It was very snowy. It was cold as
Yeah.
shit.
You were used to that though,
Yeah,
right? A
but
lot of people,
it
yeah.
reminded me of home.
Right.
That's,
Right.
and so did the field suck? Yeah, it did. And I was like, this is fucking bullshit. But I was like, well, you don't have to do this growing up, right? So you don't have to go out and freeze your ass off walking around. But on guard duty at 03, but it, I enjoyed my time at Fort Drum. I mean, Watertown. I mean, come on, every town usually out of most bases suck. They usually do. They're usually ghetto.
Army bases, yes.
Well,
And
at
Marine.
least I can't.
Marine is
And
different. I'm sorry,
oh,
excuse me. I'm sorry. Air Force is different, dude. They're always in the nice cities. That's a whole
well,
nother story. But yeah, you're right,
and I
though.
yeah, and I should say, I should preface that with saying I can't speak for the other branches because obviously I didn't serve in them.
Yeah.
So long story short, sir did some time at Fort Campbell. We ended up going to Bosnia. We did a eagery to oh good lord, where do we did some training with them. We did eageries to Fort Bragg, trained with the Ranger guys on airfield seizures. We did a bunch of stuff. And then, so we did a lot of fun training. Actually, our platoon sergeant was prior SF dude. So he would always get us, fun projects and different things. And, always, we were training in Hungary with Russians,
Oh, damn.
with Russian infantry dudes. We did a joint, check this out, back in the day, back when we were in Bosnia, we did for dignitaries, Russian dignitaries and folks from the Pentagon, we did a joint airfield seizure. It was all training, obviously, and it was super dog and pony,
Yeah.
but they did it to the nines. But we did a joint airfield seizure with, we did a mix and match. So half the birds or the choppers had Russians and half of Americans, and we would do fire teams. They were intermixed, and it was crazy. The Russians were doing hand to hand with each other, and yeah, it was crazy shit. And it
That's wild.
was kind of interesting though to see. I knew it was all bullshit, but at the same time, it was kind of cool. Like, whoever does this shit?
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
so we got to experience some really cool things while we were there. And then train on old Cold War Russian trench complex in Hungary, which is all overgrown, by the way, with weed, like marijuana with
What?
buds bigger than your fingers. Like, it was crazy. I mean, fields. And of course, everybody got the talk, like,
Don't
don't be
touch
doing
that.
any
Don't do
shit.
it.
Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna test you. And but yeah, it was really wild. And so then we came back from that, and then I ended up going to, so that was at Drum, and then I re-enlisted while I was in Bosnia, to for another duty station of choice, and was Alaska. I
Wainwright
really
or
wanted to go.
Richardson?
What's that?
Wainwright or Richardson?
So it was Fort Rich,
Okay.
right there in Anchorage, and they were like, "Oh, you got you got wings. We're going to send you to Fort Rich, and you'll be part of the 501st, the Geronimo Battalion, the only airborne battalion in Alaska at the time." And so I went there and was assigned to them and did 3 years with those guys. And interesting enough, well, we ended up we did a fun tour in Thailand with the Thai army dudes, the paratroopers. And we also went to Australia and did training with the Aussies.
Dang.
So fun. We
Not
had
bad.
such
You
a
got
fun time.
around, man.
Yeah.
You had a lot of good
Oh,
training.
some drinkers. Oh my God. And it
Which
was
ones? The Thais or the Australians or both?
oh, Australians
Australians?
by far, by far. Aussies are crazy, crazy guy, but great. I mean, yeah. So we had a great time there. But what I would share is that, and got both foreign jump wings from both places. It was really really fun. The Thai guys scare the shit out of me jumping with them. The
Oh my God.
Aussies, great dudes, professional. I mean, hard chargers. I mean, we have one guy get sucked out of the aircraft, an Aussie guy, dislocated his collarbone. I mean, shoulder and everything had dropped, and they found him.
Mm,
Was it 10 clicks away from the drop zone? And when they
damn.
found him, he had all his shit with him, and he was road marching, and his shoulder was all jacked up,
Damn.
and he was on his way to the objective. I was like, that is a hard charger. I was like, you're still fucked up, and you're still bringing all your chute, your ruck, you got
He
everything.
packed up. He did
He,
everything.
yep, he was like, screw it. I gotta, I'm because what it was is his reserve somehow deployed, and he got sucked out of the aircraft between the door bundle and the door. So it's a small window. He's lucky that he did not get severely injured, or more so than he did. But and I didn't even know that it happened. I was like, holy shit, like what happened? Like in the aircraft, you don't know. Like it's
Right.
you're just you're focused because everybody was hooked up and everybody was ready to go, and it was the other door. But yeah, if you find out about that shit after you jump, it's like, dude, like so it's crazy shit. But yeah, so
What about
then
the
after,
Thai? What about the Thai people though? You said they scared. What happened with them?
yeah, they're just maybe it was the guys that we were with, and they just seem like s- their confidence, like when they would jump, like they were. I don't know if it was just with us or what, but it almost just the way they went about things, and I was like, dude, you're like freaking me out a little bit, like
Damn.
how you do shit. And I'm like, don't effing touch my shit. Don't touch. I don't want you to touch my shoot. Like, stay the f away from me. Like, and everybody else was the same way. I don't want them touching shit.
Damn.
And
Would you
so,
would
but
you jump like would it be like an American then a Thai then American then a Thai or was it like all the Thai people jumped and all the
no, yeah, it
Americans
was
or
intermixed,
intermixed?
interstick. So
Okay,
yeah, it was
understood.
intermixed.
Shit.
And of course you had to have there's rules in order to get Thai jump wings.
Got you.
You got to have like the safeties can be American, but the jump master's got to be Thai. There's certain aircraft. So they have to meet certain criteria in order to earn it. But yeah, so I was like, whatever,
Damn.
so um but yeah, so it was, but I think the coolest was jumping with the Aussies. And when we went to Australia, we did from Alaska. We flew from Alaska to Hawaii, and Hawaii straight to Australia, and then we did an in-flight rig and we jumped into country.
Damn, that's pretty
And so,
badass.
and that was that to me had to have been the coolest drop, because it was like you're coming out in a foreign, area, and then you see these rolling hills, and you could watch the herd way off in the distance, see these herds of kangaroos.
Dang.
And then of course you had the Aussie military out there, the paras, um driving around in their Land Rovers and everything else, and making, helping us, whatever, if somebody got messed up. And we had our own folks, but yeah, it was pretty crazy. And but it was probably my uh most memorable, and it was most enjoyable. Most alcohol consumed, I would say.
Damn.
But yeah, it
You
was
on
good.
that? You were you guys on Foster's?
No, Foster's, I think a lot of times for those guys were, like, that's
It's like
piss or
Bud.
American shit.
That's like Bud Light.
Yeah,
Yeah, they got some.
yeah, they had like they had like I don't even know. So it's been so long. They had a canned drink that was like a rum and coke pre-mixed,
Oh damn.
which was pretty good. And then their beer, like, you gotta, like, it reminds me of Germany. Getting like a big freaking stein of beer, or yeah, they don't piss around with, like Foster's. Could you
Yeah,
get it? Yeah, but it's,
that's like a sin over there to get that.
yeah, it's
Order
like,
that. I got
God,
you.
you are American, right? And they already know, but the thing is that, yeah, and don't bug anybody either when the soccer or football is on,
Or
because
rugby,
they'll tell
right?
you to piss. Yeah, well, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what they call football. Yeah.
yeah.
Soccer, yeah, yeah, rugby. Yeah, rugby is a huge one too. Yeah, don't be talking. Just shut the fuck up. Drink your beer, whatever you're doing, because you'll get told that. You'll shut the fuck up. The game's on, and it's
Damn.
like, whoa, and so yeah, so completely different, completely different, uh, you know, I guess, vibe there, but it was just great. They're great people. Loved it. And then of course we got time down in Sydney and everything else. So it was really fun. And then then I left after I left Alaska. I actually, the first day, you always bring back memories when you're active duty of the day that you start off or out processing post.
Yeah.
And for me, that was 9/11.
Oh damn.
Yeah, and I actually, because I was getting in my vehicle, and I was actually living in bachelor enlisted quarters. In Alaska, they had a little bit different. If you were E6 promotable or above, you could apply to live in bachelor enlisted quarters. And I actually lived in a really nice one-bedroom apartment on base. And so when I that morning, of course, I didn't have to do PT because I was clearing, right? And I just had to
Yeah.
call in. And so I was going to go get my orders and, start my initial check-in and everything without processing. And I was like, what the hell are they talking about on the, I have my coffee and I'm thinking first day, fuck yeah, you're all pumped. And I'm like, what the hell are they talking about on the radio? And then I get to the the building on post, and I go in and everybody's glued to a TV, and of course the staff is having a special meeting, and like, what does this mean for, and we were allowed after, it was a big delay. I was probably there an hour or better before anybody came to start giving us orders and everything else. But um, the only change is that I had to show my ID card at every place that I went to, and because they had, the doors were locked or whatever, they were secure, and so they basically had a guard on every, main entrance. And I called back to the unit, and I was like, they were like, "Hey, Sar," and I talked to one of my troops, and he was on CQ. And I was like, "Hey, I'm checking in. What's going on?" They were like, "Hey, Sarmac, don't come in. Don't come in. You won't be able to leave. They're locking everybody down." So, and I was like, "Okay, roger that. Thanks for the heads up. Give Sergeant First Class, our platoon sergeant heads up that I'm checking in. I'm I'm out processing, whatever, but you guys got my cell if you need anything, but I said I won't, and then I won't be in." And it wasn't until it was a while before I actually went back to the company, because I would check in every day just to see where they were. And the battalion commander actually had them get triple strand concertina and do a
Damn.
complete, um, you know, uh, kind of like a
Just the perimeter
box
of
the
the
entire
ball. Yeah.
battalion in. Yep, to
Damn.
protect because the barracks, the battalion headquarters, everything. I mean, they had triple strand concertina all the way down. And so they had, pickets going, they had everything, and then they had guards because they didn't know what the hell was going on. And then I was like, holy shit, like, how's that going to work for me? Because I was doing or driving my POV back. And so I had a 30-06 and a 357 pistol that I used to I kept in the arms room. And I was like, well, how's that going to work? And I was like, screw that. I'm sending it back in household goods. I don't want to mess with weapons. Like, I don't know, I don't want to be detained at the border and going through Canada. And so I had a folder with me of my clearance, my security clearance. I had my orders. I had everything. I mean, and so all I did was, give it to the customs agent, and they were like, "Yep, go." And then the same thing when I was coming back, because I spent some time back home. I drove all the way straight through into northern Minnesota, and the guy at the remote customs immigration post, he was like, okay, he said, you better get home. So they didn't. Yeah, I was expecting like to get pat down and everything else. But so anyways, that was kind of my left Alaska. And then I was on orders to go to Bragg. That was my last hurrah. And I knew that, I was getting close to that, 14, 15 year mark. And so when I got to Bragg, of course, the general always gives the hoorah speech, right?
Yeah.
Like, every soldier here is a rifleman. I love that speech. And even if you're a cook, cooks are riflemen. You train with the,
That's true though.
but he was like, it's not when we go to the talking about when we go somewhere, or not if we go somewhere, it's when. And actually at the time, I didn't know it, but they were planning at the time the largest airborne assault in Afghanistan since World War II. They were actually talking about coming in and doing a mass attack in Afghanistan and just completely seizing not only the airports, but everything else. They were just going to come in and drop LGOPs, little groups of paratroopers, all over the freaking place and take over the whole fucking thing. That was the plan. Rangers and the 82nd. And of course, the SF dudes, always come in before, and just take over everything. And, but it wasn't, we didn't leave. We had a unit, a sister brigade, went before us, and we would always hear through this, what was going on in Afghanistan. So you got to remember, this was early Afghanistan. And then in January, and this was about a year later after everything kicked off, then we went in, and we left in January, I want to say, of 03. And then it's hard to think that it's been that long.
Damn.
And
20 years over.
yeah, yeah.
Going
Yeah,
21.
yeah, it's crazy, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, looking back on it, so then we were, assigned to, we were, landed in, was a Bagram, and then we were staged, the whole battalion was staged out of Kandahar. And then we started getting broken up into sending out to these fire bases in remote parts of Afghanistan. And where my platoon was sent, or was with, in fact, we had the first sergeant, company commander, and I want to say there was 3 line platoons. that were sent, and we were at uh, Asadabad, so or Abad as a lot of people call it. And it was really, quite honestly, and I'm not, obviously I wouldn't talk about it if I wasn't supposed to. It was a forward operating base for a lot of special operators in a lot of different entities, and we were really just the bitch boys there.
Hmm.
We ran base security, we ran presence patrol, up armor, presence patrol, and we were also the lucky individuals that we had to go occupy mountain observation posts for a week at a time. So we had to go climb the fucking mountain with your ruck and shit for a week at a time. And then we would get the donkey guys, we called them. The donkey guys that our CA or our CIA counter folks would contract with to bring heavy equipment up. So if we needed to bring 50 cals and ammunition, versus, if you can't get a Chinook up there, then you got to get it up somehow. So we would get the donkey guys, and then we would have one of our guys like walk right beside the donkey and escort, and then of course the rest of the squad. I was a squad leader there. I was the E6, still promotable at the time. And so yeah, did 6 months there. Then I came back and early because I was ETSing, and then I was getting out. Got my ass chewed. I never understood that. You're getting out. You're a good soldier. And then you get your ass chewed for getting out. Like Sergeant
Damn, they
Major,
love that.
they
Used to love
called me,
that.
like I was out processing in Kandahar, and the battalion
That's
sergeant
fucking
major goes,
crazy.
"McMurray, get your ass in here." And I was like, "Yes, Sergeant Major, what's going on?" "What the fuck do I hear about this? You're getting out." And I was like, "Roger that, Sergeant Major. Do you know what the fuck you're doing?" And like, he just chewed me out
Oh
for a minute. And it
god.
was like, "Yes, Sergeant Major, I do," like, and I had my plan. I had already had a plan to go active guard and reserve. And this is where the AGR thing comes in, because before Afghanistan, before I went, I wasn't slotted to go because of my ETS date. And and I was applying for AGR positions or active guard and reserve positions. And I actually had a telephonic interview and I didn't get it. It was for a training NCO position. And I didn't, in Minnesota, for a Minnesota infantry unit. And I didn't get it. I missed it. And I was like, okay, so no worries. And so first sergeant goes, "Hey, McMurray, do you still want to go with us?" One of the squad leaders, his wife found out she's got cancer. He can't go.
Damn.
And I was like, hell yeah, I've been begging you to go. And so I ended up going, obviously. And then when I came back, and I came back early, I did, I want to say like 8 to 10 packets nationwide. And I wasn't married, didn't have kids or nothing at the time. And so I sent out all these packets, and and they came back. It's funny because some I missed the date. There's some are really sticklers on things, like you really, like if you just missed the date by one day or whatever. And it came down to two positions that I got to interview for and that I was offered. One was a trainee NCO in Nome, Alaska. If anybody knows where Nome is, it's in the Arctic Circle.
Arc, yeah.
Yeah. And the second one was for a recruiting NCO in it was in Minot, North Dakota, which is kind of north central North Dakota. And so I was like, whoa, shit, like Alaska. Hell yeah, like I want to go back in a bad way. Well, there was the time change difference, so I was always leaving messages for the sergeant major, and he was like, "Listen," he goes, "if you have a truck, you may want to sell it," because he said during the winter here, roads shut down and most people buy a four-wheeler. I'm thinking, what the fuck? Like, I'm not putting my truck into storage. And he goes, and oh, by the way, you missed the last barge of the season. You can only bring one duffel bag with you until spring. And he
Damn.
goes, and then you can have your household goods shipped. And I'm like, fuck that. Like, I'm just coming back from a deployment and I'm like, screw that shit.
On the deployment, at least you got a rucksack and 2 duffel bags, right? Like you
You're
try to go out
damn
there with a third of
straight.
that.
You
Like,
damn,
damn.
yeah, right. So, so long story short, I was like, screw that. So I was like, and North Dakota is, I'm thinking, okay, Minot from northern Minnesota is not that bad, so I have my parents living in northern Minnesota, my siblings, and I was like, yeah, I might as well be closer to family. And so that's what I chose to do. Like, and I was like told, them to pound sand up in Alaska, and then basically accepted the position in North Dakota. And that's what truly, and that's how it started the whole thing. Is God, was I out for trying to remember? I think I was probably out for probably a few months. And because I really wanted, just getting back from deployment, I really, in coming back in the fall in Minnesota, I really wanted to go bow hunting for deer. And I was big into bow hunting at the time with me and my brother were. And I was like, and they said, hey, when do you want to start? And I said, well, I'm just coming off deployment. Like, I need a little bit of time. And I said, I've been planning on this hunting trip with my brother and blah, 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 blah. And they were like, here, how about, I think it was, I can't even remember what it was. It was probably 1 November or whatever. And I was like, that works for me. And so then, then I did the in processing in the state headquarters, and which is Bismarck. And then I was like, well, I suppose I need to find a place to live. And, so then I ended up it was kind of weird. Like, I was like, I always wanted to rent a farmstead, and I found a place and I rented a farmstead. I didn't, not that I was tilling land, but I wanted to go hunting. Like, that's, that's what I grew up doing. And so there were pheasant and there were deer on the, in the farm. And so, yeah, it was, I mean, it was a great time. I mean, sucked during the winter. Oh my God. Cause
I
as a
bet.
recruiter, you have those little G rides, we call them, like the sedans.
Yeah.
And if you go fast enough, you can get those skipping over snowdrifts, because I mean, swear to God, out in the country, I mean, unforgivable, like, weather, and just nasty, nasty. And that I remember, that one winter that I was just, it sucked. And but so, and God love all the recruiters out there. They got a job that nobody really wants to do, but it affords them a lot of cool perks. And but about 8 months to a year in, I realized that it wasn't for me, and I wanted to get out of it. And I went to my supervisor at the time, and I was still at E6, and he was like, "Well, let me see what I can do." And he talked to the OIC, the officer in charge, location I was at, and he said, "Actually, I'm looking." He said, we could do a swap." And there was another guy that wanted to go recruiting, and I took basically his training job, and I didn't know it, but they were grooming me for a little one-man armory in central North Dakota that you worked downstairs in a city building. It was a city armory. So if you think of like these little podunk towns, that downstairs was the guard offices and supply room and all that. And so, and I ran the arms room, the supply room. You're it.
One man
You're the
band with
one.
a shit
Yeah.
ton of shit ton of
And I
guns.
was like, what the fuck am I doing? But it was the coolest job. I mean, it was stressful, but it was the coolest job because, I was like, this is like freaking Mayberry, right? So you're in this little tiny town, and you could walk to down Main Street and go to have lunch, and you get to know the store owners, and they're like, "Hey, it's Dean from the Guard." Like, they don't know the fuck your name, but they know that, and you get to know people. And I rented another farmstead, oddly enough. And so you get to know people. Well, um, that's how I met my now wife. And so that was her hometown. And she was living in a city, where we live now, Fargo, which is about hour and a half from that town. And so long story short, we ended up dating, got married. And I was like, well, we can't, you know, I can't always commute from Fargo an hour and a half every day just one way. This is not going to work. And so I ended up taking a new position in a bigger armory, and in what a city known as Valley City, and where I started off as a supply sergeant. And I was like, well, this is outside my comfort zone too. And ended up going to, when I was in that little one-man armory, I want to back up a little bit, was a combat engineer unit. And in the Guard, for those that don't understand, when you're AGR, or active guard and reserve, you have to hold a position within the unit's MTO, right? So like the manning roster. So you could be, for example, it was a combat engineer. I think it was like a squad leader, basically. But you're so busy doing administrative shit that you typically, unless you do your 2 weeks of annual training, that you don't get time to do, full-time stuff. But you just got to hold the position. Well, you got to go to, if you don't hold that MOS or that job skill, you got to go to school to learn it.
Right.
And so I went to combat engineer school, which was, I was like, well, this is like going to infantry OSIT and learning more explosives and obstacle emplacement. And then when I went to, picked up the supply gig, then I had to go to supply school, and did that for almost 4 years. And then we got alerted to go to Kosovo. And right about that time, I applied for and got accepted for my last job within the Guard. And that was for E7, what's called a readiness position. And you supervise the administrative guy, the supply guy, the training guy or gal.
And you did it all, and you did
Yeah,
all those jobs. So no
right.
better
And they
person than
look
you.
for that. They typically look for that. How have you rounded yourself out? And so my last 3 years serving in that position. And then, of course, when I was overseas in Kosovo, they slotted me as a assistance operation NCO, and basically I ran the day shift. I ran all operations, sending out patrols, intel analyst, all that stuff. So that was a great gig. Actually, I was like, used to being out there on the ground, but I was like, this is kind of different. I'm kind of liking it. But it's kind of interesting. From the infantry world, we always looked at that stuff as pogue jobs, right?
Yeah.
And it's like everybody says it, but they're all jealous because it's like, oh, they got air conditioning, but it's kind of interesting because when you get into those positions, it gives you a different perspective. And I was like, they really actually get to interact. And it was kind of fun because coming from the infantry world, I got to, as a supply guy, I could anticipate their needs because I'm like, I know they're going to need this. And so I could have it or, request it or advise the commander and be like, oh, we never thought about that. And it's like, yeah, because I know that they will need this from experience, or just because I happen to be in a unique position of having that past experience. And that was the same for training, like for ammunition or when they were out in the range, or if they're, doing maneuvers or whatever they're doing. And it was kind of fun to draw on past experiences, and then, in a operations or support way. So kind of using it. And So sometimes it kind of sucked because you had to deal with shit when, you know, I'm like, God, would it be just nice if I just had my rucksack and my rifle and that was it. And that's all I had to worry about. And my guys, you know, it's like, come on, get your shit. You got all your sensitive items. All right, let's go. You know, I don't have to worry about all this other stuff. So, but you know, there's it, you know, that comes with the
Property
territory. But
book and hand receipts and this, that,
oh
and the
man,
fourth, and
yeah.
layouts and all the fun stuff that comes with
Ammunition
that.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
know how it goes, but I want to
yeah,
rewind to a couple of things that you said. Really the main thing is about when
yeah,
you got your ass chewed by the sergeant major for getting
yeah.
out, because it blows my mind that you have 6 months left or so on your contract.
Right.
It would still take you. You even volunteered yourself, so you figured they'd be appreciative of you saying, you know what, even though I don't have a lot of time left, I'm still going to go and make the mission happen.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do that, but you did it. What was your initial feeling when you were getting the chewing, and then like what helped you just overcome that? Because I've heard it from a lot of different people about
Mhm.
like they almost try to instill fear in you for getting
Yeah.
out. That sergeant major is going to have to leave the army one day
Yep.
too, whether you do 30 years or not. You still got to get out, man. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I don't know if that's probably, it could still be going on, now, but hopefully it's not. But at the end of the day, what did you do to combat that?
Yeah. Well, and those are great questions, right? And I think that one of the things what a lot of people don't understand is sometimes they use intimidation or other forms of their what they deem leadership style to try to keep their numbers up or to keep you in or saying, you know, I don't want to lose a good NCO or whatever, but then they chew your ass. So number one, and my first reaction is I felt like shit. Like who wants to get their ass chewed by Sergeant Major? Nobody. Nobody
Yeah,
does. So you feel like shit. You're like getting your ass chewed and like, what the fuck are you doing? Da, da, da. And but then part of me kinda got pissed off, kinda like what you were saying, Michael, like, "Wait a minute." Like, you kinda, "Whoa, whoa, what you know, why are you chewing?" Like, I didn't do nothing wrong. Like, I've
yeah,
served, I've never gotten Article 15, I've been a good NCO, I've been, you know, I have accountability of all my troops, all of my equipment, never haven't lost anybody. I, you know, accomplished all my missions, da 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 da. And it's like, so in all accounts, like I'm doing what I'm being asked of and accomplishing the mission. And it's like, why the fuck am I getting my ass chewed? And so I get a little pissed off. And so, you know, and then part of me kind of resolved back on why I was getting out. Like I was tired of the reindeer games. I was, you know, getting, you know, and back then, you know, I was like early 30s. I want to say I was like 33. And so um you know, even at 33, I think back now and I'm like, holy shit, like that was, you know, that's pretty young. But in the infantry world or active duty world, you're getting to be the crusty old dude, you know,
yeah,
like like in the line platoon. And so the aspect of like, no, this is a young man's game. This is the 18, 19-year old early 20, like, you know, and so it's time for me to move on, make room for other people. And I knew that I had bigger and better things to do with my life and I wanted to settle down. And I knew that the active duty component wasn't providing that because I had been engaged twice before and it just wasn't, you know, aligning with where I wanted to go in life. And I was really, because the more I learned about the Active Guard and Reserve program, I was like, "Ooh, what is this unicorn? Like nobody else knows about this? Like what the fuck?" And I was like, I wanted it more because I was like, "You mean I could be in my basically my home state or my backyard and like being basically an active duty soldier, but I could, you know, be normal, you
yeah,
know, and have all the, you know, I could go uh, see my relatives more than block leave or, you know, and so I was like, oh, what the hell is going on? I can actually have a life. And so, and that's what appealed to me. And so, regardless of what they said or the sergeant major said, you know, I guess it just, you know, after even after that conversation, it even solidified even more for me why I wanted to do it. I was like, hey, wait a minute. Why was he chewing my ass? Like, I just, and to real, like, what kind of motivation is that? Now, I could understand
Scare
if,
tactics.
like, yeah, and I get it, but, at the same time saying, to have a conversation with a fellow NCO and saying, "God damn it, I'd really hate hey, McMurray, I'd really hate to see you go. You're, a great NCO." That to me more flies with honey, right? Instead of going, "What the fuck are you doing?" Da, 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 da. It's like, whoa. And so a lot of people don't also realize, and I don't know, maybe the Marine Corps is similar in the infantry. The infantry world is different because it is a completely different environment. If you're very thin skinned, you're going to be butt hurt a lot of the time and walk around bruised because a lot of times you're always getting yelled at. Some of it is, and not saying that it makes it okay, but at the same time, it becomes part of the culture. So number one, I guess my initial reaction was, well, this is kind of normal, but it doesn't feel good. It didn't, and it's like, why am I getting my ass chewed for doing something that wasn't wrong? And so we hear so many of these things that somebody is just trying to make a choice for them. And it's like, instead of actually having a moment saying, have you thought this through? Do like, I'd really hate to see you go. Are you really sure that's what you want to do? And be like, yep, roger that. It's like, as long as, so instead of going, what the fuck? I don't think you know what the fuck you're doing. Like, this is the stupidest fuck, like, whoa, like, where, like, well, now you're really solidifying. Thanks for the push, so, and coming from the sergeant major, right? And I get it, but, and I don't know, maybe he was having a tough time with deployment. I don't know. Um, but yeah, it was kind of interesting, but I think his reaction helped solidify things for me. But initially it was like, I felt, like I was being whipped. Um,
Yeah.
like, whoa, what am I doing wrong? And then it's like, wait a minute, I'm not doing anything wrong. I haven't done it. What, like you think, oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. What am I so it's like, no, this is my decision. This is what I want to do. Yes, I've thought it through. He didn't know, but yes, I've already applied for positions. Like, hey, I was making actually more money, and I had to call back. I wish I could have called the sergeant major and just lit into him a little bit, but, and I always called back the first sergeant, after I got out, and bullshit with him. And I was like, I'm making more money now than I did when I was active duty because I get separate rats. I get, uh, you know, um,
Yeah.
BAH,
Yeah.
and
Maybe.
depending on your zip code, it can be more, it can be less,
Absolutely.
depending on all that, and, all that. And obviously I wasn't getting jump pay, but whoop de doo. And so I was like, whatever. And, so yeah, it was, but
It's
I'm,
crazy though. That's crazy because when you first got out of the army the first time, they gave you a free pass and didn't ask you shit. Then the second time, when you have a
yep.
better plan solidified, you know what you want to do. Instead of someone asking you, "Well, what's your plan, McMurray? What's your plan, Sarge?" Okay, well, this is what I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go to AGR. I've been applying, or I'm gonna go to school, or
Yeah,
whatever the case may be.
yeah,
That's better, man. You want to be there for your people, but we all know that that's life and human
yeah,
nature. Some people have a different style of leadership, or talking to people than others. And you're right. The infantry world is different. The 82nd is different. They're all about the mission. They're all about going. But
right.
at the end of the day, everyone's time is going to come.
Well, right, and we're
Everybody's.
all human, and that carried over to me as a leader. Is anytime that I had ever one of my troops come to me and be like, and we'd have a conversation instead of me going maybe snapping into old routines of going what the fuck, going hey and sitting down and having a conversation of going, all right, let's talk about this. What's going on for you? Is there another solution you want to look at? And turn it into maybe a mentoring part and maybe, retaining a member versus, helping push somebody out the door. Or maybe saying, you know what, maybe the path that you're looking at taking isn't the best one, but there might be another one. And saying, just make sure you look at all the options. But yeah, it was interesting because it certainly helped refine who I was and what I didn't want to be like. And so, but yeah, we got to remember at the end of the day, regardless of what branch, what unit, whatever you do, that we're all human, right? And so we got to deal with the individual. And
Absolutely.
it, yeah,
So when you got done with AGR, what was your plan? Did you have foresight of what you wanted to do when you got out? Because I mean,
yeah,
dude, from going, you had a lot of different jobs, you had a lot of
yeah,
different positions, which people seem it's hard to get in. Like you said, it's an untapped
right,
unicorn or unknown entity, right? But once
yeah.
you get in, it seemed like it was kind of easy for you to network and move around. But when your
Oh
time,
yeah,
it was
100%.
easy. When your time came to an end, what did that look like for you? Did you have a plan
So,
this time, or did you want to just live the retired
so
life?
I'm gonna throw everybody for a loop. So, my big plan when I retired, or when I was looking at retirement, was to work for. We have a pretty large regional VA hospital here. And I was like, I don't know what job I'm going to work in, but I want to work for the VA. And then, I thought, okay, here I am. I'd be in my early 40s. Even if I worked another 10 years, buy back my federal retirement or my 24 years, and then add that, it'd be looking pretty good. And I just want to share, like, so my daughter was 5, when I came back from Kosovo. Um, my son, he was our he's our mid-tour leave baby. So my wife got pregnant when I came back home on leave. That goddamn mid-tour leave shit. And but he was born right, um not long after I got back from deployment. And so here I had 2 little kids, a newborn and a 5-year-old. And I'm thinking, Dad's still got to work. Well, and I want to preface this by saying, because I'm going to throw everybody for a loop. Um, but I was brought up in a very traditional way of thinking, or religious household. Nothing crazy, everything else. But I had some paranormal experiences upon returning from Kosovo. And what I mean paranormal, so we think of mostly ghostly shit, and quite literally scared the holy bejesus out of me. And where clocks and pictures were like flying off the wall shit. And it wasn't bullshit. It wasn't like, because I'm very much the logical guy, like, is that screw or nail in the stud and everything else. And then my deceased grandmother, believe it or not, came to visit me one evening and actually pushed me into the bed and scared the holy bejesus out of me. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, am I having a PTSD moment? Am I going crazy? Like, I can't, like, my daughter's 5. As I said, my son is a newborn, and dad's got to work. We can't have a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
And but quite honestly, I come to figure out that for whatever reason, I was having a what they call a spiritual awakening. And I was like, well, what the fuck does that mean? And so through a series of events and talking to people, come to figure out that I am a medium. So for those of you going, what you Dean, you wear extra large. And it's like, no, talking about, I did at one time wear a large medium, or a medium regular, AB, or BDUs. But what I'm trying to share is the ability to communicate with those that are deceased. And it's kind of crazy. Like, and I was like, what the fuck does this mean? Like, okay, now all of a sudden I can talk to dead people. And I was quite literally like, why me? Why now? And it was because I was supposed to not only help veterans and their families, but it was to serve again, Michael, going back to the aspect of why did I serve in the first place? Be a part of something bigger than myself. And again, this was to serve others, something bigger than myself, at a bigger level. And so obviously I never did go to the VA. I never did go and work for the VA. After retiring, I took classes, try to figure out what the hell this is, how it works for me. And for a long time, like about a year or so, I just did readings, mediumship readings for free. I didn't charge anything because I was like, I don't even know what if I want to do this. Like, what this is kind of weird. And because it conjures up a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings and a lot of things that I was told growing up in the church. And I was like, wow, this is weird. But it was very natural for me to step into it as professionally. And I was like, what does that even mean professionally? Because there was only a handful of people on TV and reading all the books and everything. And so I stepped into this, we'll call it a paranormal realm of trying to figure out, talking to dead people and what does all that entail and how does that work? And, how does that look like when you start talking about helping people? And so quite honestly, it's something that I've been doing, since I've retired. And it's, some of the most rewarding work that I have done. And I've been asked to come into hospice units with dying veterans, to do, I, I can't call it counseling, because I'm not a counselor, but in a sense where you just facilitate a conversation, but then also do the mediumship intertwined with it. In a sense, it kind of becomes a pseudo counseling. I think a lot of people are in turmoil about something. Obviously, death being a very challenging topic. Not only that, but also fellow veterans that have lost their buddies. And obviously we lose loved ones all the time, right? Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, whomever, or children, which is very challenging as well. And again, it's not just family members or veterans of family members, but also, everybody else. And then also first responders. And that's kind of how I got into radio, because there was a local FM show that said, Dean, you need to come on my show. And it was a rock show. It was actually a rock radio show. And where he would bring on people from different bands, well-known bands. And he said, hey, I got the drummer from Lit on tomorrow. I want you on to be a guest on my show, and we'll do a reading for him. And I was like, sweet. And so it went really well. And the dude was like, oh, that's so awesome. And it was always, we did a live on the air. And so it was always kind of fun. We were doing it for basically these musicians and celebrities, and so it became like a little reoccurring theme. And he goes, I think you should have your own show. And I was like, no, who the fuck's going to tune in and listen about psychic medium readings? Like, I'm not going to do a whole hour on readings. And he said, well, think about it. And he said, really, the platform's yours. You can do whatever you would like. And so I met with the station manager and everything else. And I said, if I did it, I said, we could talk about spirituality or whatever. But I said, I want to talk about veteran stuff. I said, I want it to be the platform for me to give back. And I said, I want it to be something that where we focus on the do-gooders, doing good things for the veterans, their families, first responders, all those folks. And I said, and I was like, I'm thinking of the Red, White, and You show, because I want to pull back as I described it, kind of pulling back the fabric of America and showing all the grassroots folks out there. They think of the folks in the back roads and the people that make up America, but that are doing good things for veterans, or veterans doing others. And so when I started doing the radio show, I was open to this whole new world of that I'd never been into. I'd never done radio, and it was so fun. And I found and I'm sure you've found this, Michael, is doing with your podcast, is there's so many, not only veterans, but others, but they're finding gaps in the systems. And they're like, hey, there's a need for this, or I need to fix this.
Yeah,
So then
absolutely.
they start doing something, a nonprofit forms or whatever they do, like a veterans outdoor group. There's millions of them. And so all over the country. And so, connecting with these folks, telling their story, like, how did it start? And talking about how they are changing the lives of fellow veterans, and again, first responders and those folks, or their book or their movie. I mean, I've had so many in the aspect of mediumship, right? Because it's kind of all intertwined. And I got involved with some Hollywood producers, believe it or not, and some other contacts in Los Angeles. And they were big into veteran stuff and everything else. And so I was like, hey, would you want to be on the radio show? I think this would be a great fit, and it's something different. And so, I've had some great guests on talking about, and some pretty big producers, talking about their movie and how they, what their connection is, whether they served in the military or not, or, different things, and, making of the movie and different things. And it just, so cool. I mean, some of the people that I've had the opportunity to meet, I'm just like, holy shit. Like, David Petraeus. There we go. I couldn't remember his first name earlier, but General Petraeus, right? Reaching back. I thought, he'll never reach out to me. And
Right.
next thing you know, he did. And
Damn.
I will give a spoiler alert. If anybody, I did not, it was around the time that my dad was dying. And I have a bunch and by this time I had already transitioned to podcast. Um, and I had only done radio for, I think it was just shy of a year.
Okay.
And it was right before COVID that I did the switchover. Obviously, nobody knew anything was happening. And I switched over, and I had about a month or two into doing podcasts, and then COVID hit, and boom. And, and then everybody started doing podcasting hot and heavy. And but I was putting all these interviews, pre-recording them, and then I could just kick them out when I wanted to. And but my dad was going through this health challenge and everything else. And I had all these, I still have them, these interviews. And I thought, maybe one day I just need to publish them. I just need to kick them out and kind of a tribute to dad. But when that happened, that's been 3 years, and I stopped producing episodes, but I still maintain the page. I know, like Michael, where you reached out to me on the Red, White, and You page, and I still post on there, like,
Right.
things like just recently, I think the last one I probably like, if you're going to mail something to somebody overseas from the post, like what's the timeline? So, like little things like that, or, happy birthday Space Force, stupid shit, but to get engagement. And then, but also my hopes is to, if you can help just one person, that's all it's ever been about. Is, to me, that's where the money's at.
Absolutely.
And so, and obviously connecting to cool people, not, such as yourself and everybody else, but you just come to find, you go, wow, there are so many fascinating people doing so many cool, crazy cool shit
Yeah.
out there, like Jen and the Satterleys, right? You got Saw, Operation Saw, different folks that, just everything out there that people are doing either on a large scale or a little scale. And I just think that's so cool. But again, where the tagline, the moniker, if you will, the military medium, of course, is where the two aspects of my life is the military. And that really came from my wife, because she was like, you need to call yourself the military medium. I was like, no, that's stupid. And then I was like, and then after a while, when I rebranded myself, doing the mediumship aspect, I was like, now for whatever reason, I was like, I need to call myself that. And so, and then the military medium was born. So yeah, so then but I've been doing that now for quite a number of years. I think we're going on is 11 years, something like that. So, it's been kind of crazy cool, but, and something non-traditional, I guess. But I never foresaw myself. I didn't want any of it. I didn't want to be a medium. I didn't go looking for it. I wasn't into the paranormal previously. Um,
Came
you
looking for
know,
you. Your
it
grandma
came
came
looking
calling. Your
for me,
grandma
man.
came calling.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
But yeah, so it's kind of squirreled my way to where I am today, but I still look forward to connecting with folks, and it's always great to be on other people's programs such as yourself, and tell my story, and connect with fellow veterans. So
Absolutely. Hey, you definitely got an interesting story, man. You've done a whole bunch of shit, training, AGR 10 times over than someone else could never even get in, medium, grandma visits. I mean, dude, you got a crazy story, and I'm glad that you continue to serve even after the military. A lot of people, I mean, I probably lost my why at first when you first transition out. You work dead
mm,
end jobs or do this, or like you did when you first got in the military. You work in
right,
construction and living at home, and you're like, I'm
yeah,
not used to this. Nothing against our family, but
right,
you're just not used to doing that when you leave home at
yeah,
18 and go live in the condemned barracks at, for either at Fort Lewis or Fort Campbell or whatever the
yeah,
case may be, man. You're still doing your own thing. You're out in Clarksville or you're
right,
out in
right,
Spanway, Washington, or wherever the case may be. But nah, man, I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing the stories. But
yeah,
I got two serious questions for you.
yeah,
Real,
for sure.
did you ever try Vegemite?
Oh
That's
yeah, that shit sucks ass. Funny story. So we were doing an op in Australia, and before we were going to jump into the field and then do like a 4-day op, and they were like, "Oh, hey, treat for you guys. We get Aussie patrol rations, they were called. And they're
yeah,
like sea rations. They're heavy as shit. And
yeah.
so we were going through it, and they had a look uh like a tube of Vegemite. And I was like, Vegemite? What the fuck
um,
is that? And so of course they have some crackers, and then they were like, oh, and then somebody said, oh yeah, mate, it's like good. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I put it on it, and I was like, oh man. And I was laying there. Of course, they're laughing their ass off. And it just, ugh. Maybe there's a way to eat it, but I threw that shit away. It was gross.
no, absolutely
Yeah.
not. Probably. What
I'm
about?
not
And
a
did you see the Northern Lights when you're in Alaska?
100%.
That's
Yep.
pretty cool.
So for the best time, and I will share a quick story.
Cool.
Best time that I ever saw the Northern Lights. We were doing a battalion size movement, and it must have been like 40, 50 below. Was one of the coldest nights that we were out. We did the uh, Arctic Infantry um leaders course, I believe it was called. And but anyways, it was cold, stupid cold. And we were all on snowshoes, but the best thing about that night was the Northern Lights. I mean, they were just dancing. It was just mesmerizing. And yeah, so it made me think of northern Minnesota. But the thing that sucks about Northern Lights, they're the best when it's the coldest.
Yeah,
And it's like, so you got to freeze your, what off to
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 catch them.
get some good views. But I mean, it was still a memory that obviously I got all my hands and fingers and everything else. So, but yeah, that I just remember it sucking like, God, this is stupid. We need, well, we got nice warm tents. Let's go back to them.
No, I don't blame you. You got to be out in Norway with the hot tub going, sitting in the hot tub in the
Oh
igloo or
man,
whatever like that,
that
and
would have been
checking it
sweet.
out. Absolutely.
Maybe
What?
maybe in a next life I'll have to reenlist and go over and train with the Norwegian army or something. So
There you go. Hey, you never know, man. You know anything's
yeah,
possible. But
yeah,
did we leave anything out? Did you want to say anything else before we close it up for the day? I want to say thank you again for joining me. Thanks for putting yourself out
yeah,
there. Everyone go check out Dean if you guys want to tap in with him and get him on your show, or talk to him about
yeah.
the mediumship aspect of life. If that's something that you guys are interested in, he put himself out there and seems to have the experience to go with what he's talking about. So if that's something you guys are into, tap in with Dean. I'm sure he'd be happy to have you around and make something happen for you.
Absolutely. And if they want to check out the website too, Michael, they can deanmcmurray.com or themilitarymedium.com. You can check out past interviews that I've done on other shows, different bios, different, all that kind of different stuff out there. So you can check that out as well.
Okay, for sure. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. If you guys made it this far, hopefully you guys gained some value from Dean's story. I mean, he's had a crazy one, shared a whole bunch of good information, knew a whole bunch of leaders at a younger age, knew generals at the lieutenant colonel level, got some cool assignments, some cool training. So appreciate y'all listening in. If you guys are in the military space or a veteran yourself and you want to come on and share your story, I'd be happy to have you guys on as many times as you want to get your message out to the world. All our voices matter. All your stories matter. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Continue to be great and try to push yourself to the limit. Appreciate y'all joining in, and y'all have a blessed day. Take care.